News.
Good morning, I'm Natalia Cooper. We begin with the latest numbers out of New South Wales. The state recording 818 new cases in the past 24 hours and sadly 3 more deaths. Mark Burrows joins me now on the desk. Mark, the numbers aren't great, but there is some positive news in regards to vaccinations.
Indeed, Natalia. Today is a story of numbers. As you say, 818 cases, not great, similar to yesterday, 42 infectious, 3 deaths. But the surge in vaccinations, what was seen over the last 3 or 4 days, is really starting to bear fruit. New South Wales has now reached 5.9 million vaccinations. The Premier wanted 6 million by the end of August, and clearly we'll achieve that in the next day or so. So that is really great news. She's especially enthused by this because we might hit that 70% vaccination target by the end of October, and the much vaunted 80% when we can start to see freedoms will be in November. Another figure that's really interesting to come out of today, New South Wales, out of this cluster, has now notched 13,000 cases, 13,000 positive cases of COVID since this all started towards the latter stages of June, which is, on reflection, really an amazing figure. We did get a great insight into what is happening in our hospitals at the moment. 586 COVID patients in hospital, 100 of them are in ICU, 32 people are on ventilators. We heard from Ni Nguyen, who's an intensive care specialist, and she spoke so well about the problems the nurses and the doctors are facing in intensive care wards at the moment. Here she is.
We're really fortunate to work in a health system that's well coordinated and resilient, and it's world class. But what's worried us over the last few weeks is the increasing number of patients who are admitted to intensive care, and they are younger, they are staying in intensive care for longer, and they are needing care that can't be provided anywhere else in the wards. There are those who are on breathing machines and on heart-lung machines. And what has really worried us is the number of young patients who are coming in. Our nurses are coming and our doctors are coming up to work every day despite knowing how difficult it is. They're leaving children just like you at home, and our call is to please get vaccinated. We know that vaccination decreases your risk of getting severe disease. We know that vaccination decreases your chance of death. And we're here to call to ask you to help us.
It is so powerful, Natalia, when you actually hear from an intensive care specialist. It really does bring the message home. The other big issue today in New South Wales is what's going to happen to primary school students. Obviously stayed in lockdown until the end of September. All the indications are that primary school kids will not return in October, and I can hear the groans right across New South Wales now. Homeschooling will have to continue. The Premier says she'll have more to say about this at the end of the week, but the problem she has at the moment that even yesterday we had something like 100 school kids have contracted COVID. They can't get vaccinated until the earliest, maybe next year. So it's hard to see how she can possibly have a return to school for those primary school kids.
A lot of parents hanging on that announcement, which should come later in the week, as you said, Mark. Thank you for the update.
Okay.
This is a live shot over Bankstown in Sydney's southwest right now, one of the 12 local government areas where new restrictions have come into force overnight. Exercise is now limited to 1 hour per day and masks must be worn outdoors. Residents will also be under a curfew, which will kick in for the first time at 9 o'clock tonight. Let's go to Laura Tunstall now, who's in Parramatta for us. Laura, what's the feeling like there?
Well, Natalia, it's pretty quiet here in the centre of Parramatta. We've seen a few people out and about to do essential shopping. There are some people out walking. However, we've also seen police moving on people who've decided to sit here in the square and take a break. They've asked them to continue on their way. As you mentioned, these tough new restrictions have come into place today. There will be a curfew from 9 p.m. at night until 5 o'clock in the morning for those 12 LGAs of concerns. People have to remain in their homes during that time unless they are an authorised worker, they're seeking medical treatment, or there is an emergency. When it comes to exercise in these hotspots, people will only be allowed to do 1 hour a day. Also, we've seen retailers in these areas being forced to shut their doors. Retailers like hardware stores, office supplies, also nurseries are all having to move to a click and collect model from today. Masks, of course, are now compulsory outdoors across Greater Sydney unless you are doing exercise. Look, these are some of the toughest restrictions that we've seen put in place since the start of the pandemic. Authorities say it's really about making a last-ditch attempt to try to drive down those case numbers, Natalia.
Laura, thank you. The Royal Melbourne Hospital is on high alert after it was revealed an infected Shepparton man unknowingly exposed 3 wards to the virus. Isabella Stashkowski has the details.
We've recorded another spike in cases in Victoria with 71 new infections, 22 of those are mystery cases, bringing the total number of active infections in the state to 494. Authorities will want testing to increase as well, with around 46,500 test results received in the past 24 hours. Newer clusters are driving the case numbers up, including the Shepparton outbreak. A man from the regional town unknowingly brought COVID here to the Royal Melbourne Hospital. Patients, staff and visitors have tested positive, with more than 400 staff for load, a huge impact on the hospital as a whole. The man had heart surgery some 11 days ago and was only diagnosed after. He was moved all around the hospital, so the ICU, radiology and the cardiac wards have been exposed. He wasn't tested beforehand because at the time Shepparton wasn't considered a high-risk location. But the rules have now been reverted to the ones we experienced last year, and pre-operative tests will again be compulsory. Meanwhile, it's been revealed hospitals don't know which of their staff are vaccinated, concerning some healthcare bosses. As immunisation isn't mandatory for health workers at this point, they're unable to access those records. This morning there are again calls to make the vaccine mandatory for all healthcare workers.
Queensland is ramping up its vaccine rollout. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk announcing a plan that will see vaccination hubs set up specifically for staff at food distribution centres. Workers at 28 crucial depots will be offered the chance to get the jab in an effort to protect the state's food supply. It comes as the state today recorded 2 new cases of COVID-19, both in isolation. The Prime Minister has thrown down the gauntlet to states threatening to break away from the roadmap out of the pandemic, insisting we need to live with the virus, not in fear of it. Let's go live to federal politics reporter Eliza Edwards in Canberra. Eliza, some state leaders argue the goalposts have shifted.
Yeah, Natalia, it was less than a month ago that all states and territories endorsed a plan to reopen borders and use lockdowns sparingly once 70 and 80% of the population is vaccinated. Now, Queensland and WA are threatening to keep their borders closed when those thresholds are met because they don't want anyone bringing in the virus from interstate. They argue the agreement was based on the assumption that case numbers would be kept to a minimum. That's clearly not the situation we have in New South Wales right now. The Prime Minister delivered a firm message to the premiers this morning saying that the whole country needs to learn to live with the virus, not in fear of it, and arguing lockdowns do more harm than good when most of the population is vaccinated. Let's hear from Queensland's Premier and then Scott Morrison.
The goalposts have changed in the fact that it was premised on there being around 30 cases in the community, and now we have thousands of cases.
If not at 70%. And 80%, then when? Then when? We must make that move, and we must prepare to make that move. Otherwise, we stay in the cave forever.
Ultimately, Natalia, it's the states that control when the nation reopens, but the Commonwealth does have the power over the purse strings. The Prime Minister not following his Treasurer in threatening to turn off federal financial support to states that go rogue, but it is a possibility down the track.
Eliza, thank you. Some breaking news in from New Zealand. The country has just recorded 35 new local cases, most of them from Auckland. The current outbreak now sits at 107 total infections. US President Joe Biden says he doesn't trust the Taliban but has no other choice other than to work with them right now. 28,000 people have been rescued from Kabul since the Taliban overthrew the government 8 days ago. Here's correspondent Michael Genovese.
Well, this working relationship between the Taliban and the United States has got a lot of people nervous. The two parties who've been fighting each other for the past 20 years have now come to an arrangement that has so far allowed the safe removal, the safe rescue of 28,000 people from Kabul. But many are questioning when this agreement might expire.
I don't trust anybody. The Taliban has said we'll see whether they mean it or not. They're seeking legitimacy.
The US has ramped up its rescue mission, ordering 6 commercial airlines to help. It's secured an extra 18 planes to help clear the backlog of evacuees at US bases in third countries. Joe Biden's botched exit from Afghanistan has earned him few fans, today laughing off opinion polls that have seen his popularity take a hit.
I haven't seen that poll.
It's out there.
But what he did see were the scenes of hundreds of Afghans desperate to leave a country with a future that is uncertain. The last time the Taliban was in charge, they removed basic human rights for women and girls, banning them from school and work, while Afghans were whipped and had their hands cut off as punishment for stealing. You can see the desire to leave. And now adding to the uncertainty of the situation, the threat of a terror attack. US intelligence suggesting ISIS may try target the crowded bottlenecks at the airport gates.
We know that terrorists may seek to exploit the situation and target innocent Afghans or American troops. They're maintaining constant vigilance we're maintaining the constant vigilance to monitor and disrupt threats from any source, including the likely source being ISIS-K.
The Taliban and ISIS are enemies, and with the current situation on a knife's edge, any form of terror activity could make this already dangerous and complex situation even more messy.
Former Liberal MP Craig Kelly is teaming up with billionaire Clive Palmer to contest the next federal election. The crossbencher has been appointed leader of the United Australia Party and plans to run on an anti-lockdown platform.
We'll put in freedom over fear. We'll put liberty over lockdowns. We'll be putting choice over coercion. And we will be a major force in politics, make no mistake.
The New South Wales MP quit the party in February after clashing with the Prime Minister over Kelly's controversial views on alternative COVID-19 treatments. A church service turns costly. $35,000 worth of fines handed out at a gathering in a Sydney hotspot. We're live there next. 16 people killed and dozens injured. Wild weather wreaks havoc in the US. And highway turned racetrack. How this racehorse ended up here. 60 people have been sprung at a church service in one of Sydney's hotspot areas. Parishioners copping more than $30,000 in fines for COVID breaches. Let's go live to Tiffany Genders in Blacktown. Tiff, this isn't the first time this church has held an illegal gathering.
Well, according to neighbours Natalia, this has happened at least 3 times in the past week. It hasn't sit well with them, and they had made complaints to Crime Stoppers. When police turned up to the Christ Embassy at about 7:30 last night, they found 60 people inside, 30 adults and 30 children. This church is in Blacktown, one of Sydney's hard lockdown suburbs, and we're told that parishioners travelled from as far away as Fairfield, Canterbury, Bankstown and Liverpool, which are also hotspots. $35,000 in fines have been handed out. Now, church services are able to be streamed online, but with minimal staff, only 2 people maximum singing or chanting. Video posted online from another sermon from this church yesterday shows a full band and both male and female singers. There was also some pretty alarming messaging from the pastor.
We declare that lockdowns are over in the name of Jesus. Lockdowns are over in the cities of New South Wales.
They've had a few services that we've noticed, and more people than we thought they probably should have had. Multiple cars pull up with no masks or anything.
Blacktown was named by the Premier this morning as one of the big areas of concern. The congregation has been labelled as selfish and arrogant by locals who are now facing the tightest restrictions since the pandemic began. We have reached out to the church, but at this stage they are not willing to make a comment. Natalia.
Tiff, thank you. Wild weather is smashing the US on all fronts. Flash flooding has devastated Tennessee, washing away homes and destroying property, leaving up to 16 people dead. Meantime, Tropical Storm Henri is battering New York, with flooding in the streets of Brooklyn and winds of up to 95 kilometres an hour. It's the strongest system to hit New York since Hurricane Sandy 9 years ago. Here's some track work of a different kind. A racehorse in Kentucky has bucked its rider and taken off, trotting through traffic along a highway. The filly, named Bold and Bossy, was supposed to make her track debut, but took a detour instead. She was eventually returned to her relieved owners with a couple of minor scratches. A year's worth of free flights, hotel stays and fuel up for grabs. Qantas unveils a new rewards program, how you can be in the running to win. 2 chimney stacks reduced to rubble in seconds. And in sport, the Sea Eagles enforcer who doesn't believe in resting players ahead of the NRL finals. Welcome back. Discounts, points and free flights could be yours. All you have to do is get vaccinated. It's part of a new rewards campaign by Qantas. From tomorrow, fully vaccinated Aussie frequent flyers will be able to claim smaller prizes while also going in the draw for the mega prize. That winner will receive a year of free flights to anywhere their heart desires. It took just 15 seconds for a pair of 200-metre tall chimney stacks to come crashing down in the UK. The concrete towers and a boiler house were demolished at a disused power station in West Yorkshire. The site has been closed since 2016 as part of the owner's transition to low carbon energy. Let's go to sport now. With NRL finals looming, top teams will look at resting players to re-energise them before the big games. But Manly's Jake Trbojevic disagrees with that approach, saying every game is crucial to improve.
I think at this time of year, you want everyone out there just working on their skills and that, and working on combinations and really fine-tuning their craft. And I think, the last couple of rounds is a good opportunity for everyone to do that.
The Sea Eagles are chasing a top 4 finish, needing to win both their remaining games against the Bulldogs and the Cowboys. The final contest of the AFL home and away season proved largely uneventful. The Adelaide Crows burying Wooden Spooners North Melbourne 98-54. Roos coach David Noble pleading with fans to recognise the team's overall improvement.
For our fans and our members that came, and for those that left early, I'm sure, it's not good enough, but the overall growth of our group is extremely positive.
Carlton says it will not be rushed into a decision on coach David Teague's future, who is right now being briefed on the results of an external review into the club's football department. Ash Barty has a new piece of silverware for her rapidly expanding trophy cabinet, winning the Cincinnati Masters in straight sets over Jill Tymon. Barty was near flawless, demolishing the Swiss wildcard 6-3, 6-1 in a perfect warm-up for the US Open. It's the 5th title and 40th tour match won by Barty this season, the most of any WTA player. Go Ash. And Chelsea has downed Arsenal in the London derby, outclassing the Gunners in a 2-0 victory to grab top spot on the table. Southampton and Manchester United couldn't be split at St Mary's, drawing 1-1. Stay with us, we'll have all your weather details next. Let's check the national weather. A sunny and warm winter's day in Brisbane. A very warm 27 in Sydney, but there could be a storm this afternoon. It'll be wet and 19 in Canberra, wet and cold in Melbourne today. Showers are set to clear in Hobart, but get heavier in Adelaide. Mostly fine in Perth and 33 the top in Darwin. Tomorrow, a shower or two for Brisbane. Heavy falls in Sydney and the temperature dropping significantly to 16 degrees. Rain and 11 in Canberra, cold and wet in Melbourne. A couple of showers in Hobart. Hobart, 14 the top in Adelaide, fine, and 22 in Perth, wet but warm in Darwin. And that's Nine's Morning News. We'll have your afternoon news at 4 o'clock, 5 p.m. in Adelaide and Perth. Thanks for your company.